All right, we are ready when you are.
We are good to go.
Okay. All right, so we are back again for another of our weekly live streams, and I'm super excited to now be the host for Jason. I've spoken to him a while back, and he was hosting me, and we had this awesome conversation, which made me think a lot. And I'm hoping that we can do the same to Jason this time. And quick introduction before we dive in: Jason is the founder and head consultant of Greenwood Consulting. It's a B2B and D2C consulting agency. For more than 20 years now, Jason has helped brands across Australia, New Zealand, and beyond by architecting compelling online shopping experiences and engagement experiences too. But for me, how I know Jason is he's a very passionate content producer. He loves talking about all things e-commerce growth through his podcast At the Coalface. So welcome, Jason. Super excited to host you today.
Kyle, super great to be here. It's nice to be on the other side of the microphone. You know, it was awesome having you on the podcast. It was definitely one of our most popular episodes. They loved hearing about what you're building and how you're building automations and how you're building these playbooks over at Mason for e-commerce. And so it's super cool to be on the other side of the mic. So thank you for hosting me.
The pleasure is all mine. And before we dive into question and answers, I think it would really help the audience. Just give us a little bit about your background, how you ended up where you are, and what do you do to help e-commerce teams today?
Yeah, so I've been working in e-commerce for over 20 years now, and really it started out with I had my own e-commerce pure play back in the very early days of e-commerce. I was actually working for an early e-commerce agency, and then decided as I went through that experience and started to really understand what was involved in e-commerce and building e-commerce experiences for merchants. And this was in the early days, long before Shopify came along, long before SaaS platforms came along, and building e-commerce sites was really difficult. It was really hard. Most customers, most end consumers, they had an extreme distrust of e-commerce. So, the early days of e-commerce were hard, and it was a hard slog to get merchants to even believe that e-commerce had a future. And then we went to a place where e-commerce became really accepted by the public, and that period of growth was pretty crazy. It was fun to be part of the industry. Had my own e-commerce pure play, then went back to agency side again after selling my pure play. And I've worked for some of the largest e-commerce merchants in this part of the world, and also run an agency. I've been a director in an agency, head of solutions, and now I run my own e-commerce consultancy. But we're a little bit different in that we consult on the entire commerce stack. So not just the e-commerce front end, but we focus on people, process, tech, and data, and that's across the whole of the commerce stack. So whether that's ERP, CRM, CDP, PIM, point of sale, system integration, marketing automation, warehouse management. Basically, if it's got to do with commerce, then we consult on it. And we're a pure consultancy. So we consider most of our services pre-agency. So getting merchants ready to engage with agencies, vendors, delivery partners, and we will work with them to develop their full stack solution architecture and integration architecture and their data modeling as well. Because many merchants, their data is just not ready for digital channels. It may be ready for field sales reps, and it may be ready for maybe even point of sale, but you need an entirely different data set, both from a customer data perspective and from a product data perspective for digital channels. And so that's really how we help, and that's where I've landed, and I'm absolutely loving every minute of it.
It sounds super, super relevant. And, it's even with all the solutions and platforms, a bunch of them now, almost no code that are out there, like Shopify in a way, to help, brands come online and set up their online store. There's a lot that goes behind that whole migration and shift. It's literally a new way of thinking in a way. It's not just about opening up a website or a Craigslist of sort, right? So totally speaking to music to my ears right now. And Jason, when there was one quote that I came across from you, where you mentioned something about smartification of all things, right? Like everything is going to become net connected, and most of the way we buy is going to be based on automation. So tell us a little bit, expand, double click on smartification of all things, and what does it mean for a brand today?
Yeah, look, I coined a term a few years ago. I think it was maybe even 2016. I coined a term called stealth commerce. And what I was really referring to was the concept that in the future, commerce will largely be automated in the sense that customers or consumers will no longer recognize most transactions as transactions. So today, when consumers buy, they know they're making a transaction. They've got to go to a website or they've got to go to a physical store. They have to pick out what they want. They have to add it to a cart. They've got to put in their payment details. They've got to put in their address details. So they definitely know they're buying something when they buy it. In the future, this is going to largely be driven by automation and smartification. So if we think of smart pantries and smart fridges and smart vehicles, what's going to happen is we'll be able to set thresholds of different items, for example, we want to have in our pantry or our fridge at all times. And those things will auto replenish based on, if it's fresh food or fruit or vegetables or meat, we're going to know by IoT when something enters our fridge and when it's expired, we're going to know if we haven't used it that it's expired and we need to replace that. And so we'll have a connection between our smart fridge or our smart pantry and our chosen grocery store, our chosen grocery provider. And those orders will just happen automatically. Those orders will be pushed to those providers. They'll deliver those goods automatically to us on a replenishment required basis. And maybe they'll aggregate replenishments over a period of a week and then deliver it to you on a Saturday or a Friday or whenever you prefer to receive your delivery. Same thing's going to happen with smart vehicles. Cars now know when their brakes run out. When their brakes are running low, they now know when the oil needs to be changed. For internal combustion vehicles, they know when a headlight is out. And so, what's going to be able to happen is those orders for those products. For example, if you need an oil change, order for oil and a filter is going to go through to your local auto parts store. A booking is going to happen automatically with your preferred service center. And then it's going to automatically turn up in your calendar at a time when you've got a gap in your calendar, and then you're going to be able to take your car in to have it serviced. So, and there's many more things like this, whether it's clothes and having an embedded IoT device inside the clothing to know when it's threadbare or worn out, or after a certain number of washes, it needs to be replenished and replaced. So I think that there is just going to be a rapid evolution of not only commerce everywhere, meaning everything is going to be touchscreen and smart enabled to where you can actually trigger off a transaction from anywhere, being net connected with your smart device and AR experiences, etc. But the actual smartification of physical things is what is going to allow so many of these transactions to happen in a replenishment type of a way that the consumer will pre-authorize in advance those transactions to happen. So when each and every individual transaction happens, they don't need to know about it. It just happens. It just hits their credit card. It just bills them automatically. It's a bit like the subscription model of today, but there's still a bit of friction in the subscription model. And a lot of that friction is going to go away with the smartification of the world.
Yeah, I think the friction with subscription is a lot of overcommitment that you kind of like somewhere in your mind you feel like I do have to use it, but whereas in this case it's about something needs to be replenished. You have used it or you needed to use it and it's not there anymore. Do you think the Amazon dash button, I would call it still an experiment because it's definitely not a household name yet. What do you think is required, or what is missing in the ecosystem today for even someone like an Amazon to be able to do that?
Really, it's the hardware and the intelligence and the IoT in the consumer sphere. So not everybody has a smart fridge. Not everybody has smart pads in their pantry yet. There's a lot of hardware manufacturers that are working on this to where, for example, in your pantry, you can have a smart weighing pad, a smart scale that sits underneath your your rice container, for example, and then you program in how much rice you want to have at any given point in time in your pantry. And when you put that container back on the smart weighing pad, it will, when it gets down to a certain level, it will just trigger off an order. So there's lots of manufacturers that are and hardware device engineering companies that are starting to solve for this now, but it's been very slow. And I think that obviously for Amazon wants to simply be one of your preferred retailers, right? So regardless of who you choose to connect your smart devices to, they want to be your number one choice for absolutely everything that you buy, whether it's a discretionary purchase, a one-off purchase, a replenishment purchase, doesn't really matter. They want to supply everything in your life, pretty much, if they can. And so really, Amazon can push this a little bit in the sense that they already produce certain hardware, right? So they can push more into the consumer hardware space. So obviously with Alexa and all the rest, we've got smart voice activated devices today. We've got some smart devices from Amazon, but if they really want to get deeply embedded in the retail space, they're gonna have to push much further down the hardware space. But I think also some of the tooling that they're building out for B2B merchants, so they're just walk out technology and their in-store camera technology, that will be able, once that's perfected, it will be able to be shrunk down in size and consumerified to where maybe all you got to do is put a tiny little camera inside your fridge that's Wi-Fi connected, and all of a sudden now it can look at the things in your fridge and detect when something's going off or needs to be replaced, or you remove something from the fridge. So I think that they are already on the path of trying to figure out how to consumerize, particularly for CPG and consumables. They're trying to figure out how can we embed ourselves into a consumer's life to where they never ever have to think about where they purchase. We are the default supplier.
Yeah. And the interesting thing about that, like the Amazon grade infrastructure that you're talking about, like the experiments, the technology that they have already invested and been investing into. I mean, most of the store front itself, your Amazon, how we see today, the recommendations, the coupons, the lightning deals that come in, much of that is actually automated, right? So these like guys like Amazon are already have the tech infrastructure. They're getting ready for that world. What about the rest of the world, the 99%, the D2C stores, more and more that are coming online, and you can't run away from the fact that you need to have a direct to your consumer presence, right? And how do they get started? Do you think some kind of automation, embracing automation is a first step towards that world?
I think most, particularly startup e-commerce retailers, whether they're a pure play or they're omnichannel, they really have to, it's going to get harder. It already is much harder than it was, say, 5 years ago from a competitive landscape perspective. There's been a tremendous amount of consolidation in almost every category and vertical of e-commerce now. And so the ones that are sort of mid-size, they now have the resources to become ever bigger, right? And so there's fewer and fewer categories or verticals that startups can see immediate success in without spending a lot of money on customer acquisition, right? So when they first start out, when a brand first starts out online, they typically don't need a tremendous amount of automation in their business because they're not at a scale where they need it yet, right? They're not popcorn that's popped yet. So maybe they need, when they first start out, maybe the only automation they need is an integration between their website and, say, a carrier integration platform to where they can easily print off their shipping labels. They can, the track and trace is automatic. The fulfillment is automated between that app and, say, for example, Shopify, and that can trigger off the transactional email to the customer with their tracking details. And maybe that's the only level of automation they need from an order management and processing perspective. But, as you grow and as you scale, you need more and more automation. Otherwise, you just simply have to continue to throw bodies at every single operational function of your e-commerce business. And so that's where these app stores, and that's why when we think of somebody like a Shopify, that's why they've got over 8,000 apps in their app store, because a huge percentage of those apps are all about automating certain pieces of
Hmm.
your e-commerce operations or your marketing functions of your business, automating that with smart technology, AI, machine learning, etc. And so do I think automation is critical for e-commerce growth? Absolutely. It's unquestionable that you have to have a level of integration and automation to scale today, unlike ever before in the history of e-commerce, particularly once you get to be mid-size and above. You now have to have automatic integrations with back office systems, ERPs, CRM, CDPs, PIMs. It all has to be integrated because it all has to share data with each other to be fully effective. So automation is mission critical.
And you brought about a very interesting point about how data and automation are they are not dichotomies, right? They have to exist in tandem. And I was listening to one D2C brand founder who's taken his brand to be a unicorn now, and he was talking about how expertise, experience, and data are like the three prongs of how he grew his business to be a unicorn, right? And so let's dive into. We spoke about data. Expertise is, how do you automate? What are the strategies that you should automate when, right? And what about experience, right? How do you pull experience into it? Like CAC is super expensive today. You really have to optimize your CLV, and your storefront and the store experience is pretty much the last, I would say, battlefield that you have to differentiate yourself, kind of like stand against big retail, stand against, being just another product on Amazon. So how do you think about, how do you, Jason, what would you suggest for brands to actually, when they're starting to break out, when they're starting to, find product market fit, and as they start growing, how do they leverage automation and data to actually create better experiences for their storefronts?
I think this is a pretty mature area of retail e-commerce now. We've got mainstream search and merch technologies that really are mostly plug and play now. And really what that's about is about not only the discovery of appropriate products for the customer and personalization of the product discovery journey, but it's also it's now expanding into the content and brand journey at the same time. And in order to be sticky with a consumer, right, something like 90%, the data shows globally, something like 85 to 95% of retail consumers will only shop at a given e-commerce site one time. So that means that the vast majority of e-commerce websites out there will be in constant customer acquisition mode, because their customers will, 9 out of 10 customers will only ever buy off them once. Now you can do all sorts of things around retention and remarketing and email and all the rest, but you're only going to be able to move the needle so much. And even if you move the needle in a massive way, right, you are still potentially only ever going to have 8 out of 10 customers are only ever going to still buy off you one time. So you're only ever going to have 2 loyal customers out of 10 that you can then remarket to and focus on long-term CLV, right? So what has to happen is that what brands have to do is they not only have to develop a really solid retention strategy for those 2 customers that they have the chance to retain, but they also have to contain their customer acquisition costs. And the only way to do that today is to not have an over reliance on the Facebooks, the Googles, and the Amazon marketings of the world, particularly through paid and performance. If you are totally reliant on that for customer acquisition, you are dead, because the inflation rates in those acquisition channels are so high that is totally unsustainable for the vast majority of retailers out there. So there's 2 ways in which merchants can help contain their CAC. Is even if they're using performance channels like Facebook and Google and Amazon, they need to be gathering extensive amounts of 0 and first-party customer data so that they can create their own segments, so that they can create their own lookalike audiences and send those off to those performance marketing platforms, so that they are not 100% reliant on the 0 and first party data and the segmentation and targeting of those platforms for all of their acquisition, right? Because what Google and Facebook would prefer that you do, and Apple and Amazon for that matter, is rely and just trust them. Just say, look, this is our target demographic. This is our target customer. You go out and find the ones that fit us, right? And if you
Yeah.
if you basically outsource all of your zero and first party data collection to those big walled gardens, then you will forever be paying them for access to it. So that's why CDP, customer data platforms, quiz commerce platforms like Jebbit, and other zero and first party data collection platforms are becoming so important, so that you can contain those CAC costs even when using performance media. Now, the other thing is also looking for embedding yourself as a retailer into existing communities where your buyers already live. So we're not talking trying to simply pay for traffic in every instance. We're trying to have conversations where our customers already are. So in most cases nowadays, that's social media, right? It's developed. It's in other places. You know, it's in places like Quora. It's in places like Reddit. It's in places like Pinterest. It's in places. It's these micro audiences where we need to be having, instead of talking at our potential customer base or our potential audience, it's about how can we engage with them there, so that we are top of mind every single time we and our products are under consideration for purchase. We are top of mind, and the only way to do that is to constantly be in their spaces.
Yeah, that's an. I mean, I love that answer. Nobody could have put it better than Jason. But we are at at our 20-minute mark, so I just want to make sure we cover the questions from audience before I pull Jason into answering some of my questions again. So the first question, Jason, is what is the one piece of advice that you'd like to share with e-com merchants who are starting out with store automation? And that's from Ash.
I would say automate the things that are operationally heavy. So again, those really simple apps and automations that can help with fulfillment of orders, for example, anything to do with pick, pack, and dispatch, that usually is a heavy lift for most merchants when they start out. They don't want to be handwriting address labels on parcels. They don't want to be manually putting consignments into a tracking page with a carrier. They want that to be automated, right? So anything like that is repetitive in your business, that you do every single day operationally in your business, and it just keeps happening over and over and over again. You need to automate the things that are operationally intensive. You start there, and then you move out from there, so that you can assign human resources to the stuff that really adds value, right? To customer service, to sales, to all to the marketing and to the consumer engagement side of your business, and to the brand building side of your business. You need to automate the operations so that you can scale the unscalable parts of your business.
Yeah. And the second question is from Barry. Do you see no code as something essential to automate faster or better, and can that change according to the size of your team or your business?
Yeah, look, there's almost very, very, very few merchants out there have an internal development team. That's the reality. Very few merchants even have highly technical people inside their business, right? Most businesses are built around products that they love, marketing, curation of products, or making of products that scratch an itch for the merchant, right? And so as a result of that, all of the modern technologies are low code or no code, in the sense that all the apps that you install into a Shopify store or something like that, you don't have to have coding experience in most cases to be able to get those apps installed and up and running, and they've got their own embedded UI as part of the app for marketers, for example, to configure and utilize. And so do I think that no code and low code is mission critical, particularly for smaller brands? 100%, because they just don't have the technical capability in-house to build custom things.
Yeah. And I'm adding on to that question, Jason. What do you think for mid-sized to large brands? Do you think it no code helps, for example, bring the subject matter expert closer to the actual go live? Because otherwise, you have to coordinate with your development team, with your design team, etc., to actually, let's say, to get a campaign live, right? Do you think that can also help, whether the no-code product is built internally or externally, help reduce the time to market and distance between the subject matter expert and actual go live?
Yeah, again, it's similar, I think, even with larger brands, let's say mid-enterprise brands, the vast majority of those don't have, development capability in-house. They work with a development partner. They work with an agency, right? An
Yeah.
e-commerce agency development partner. They work with system integration partners. They don't do that work in-house 9 times out of 10,
Yeah.
regardless of size. So any no-code, low-code solution is going to be beneficial because it allows the business users inside the business to leverage that technology very quickly. And so the time to value is so
Yeah.
fast that all of a sudden any technology that is implemented is starting to be leveraged very quickly. And particularly when you get up to enterprise grade software, that time to value becomes mission critical in terms of ROI. And so that's why SaaS technologies have become so popular, because there is no concern about getting infrastructure set up and servers and all the rest, right? And security and compliance and PCI and all the rest and GDPR and all the rest. You kind of outsource all of that pain to the vendor. And that's why no code, low code solutions have become so popular. And even to the point now where even system integration platforms are no code, low code, or there are options out there with no code, low code system integration platforms out there for exactly that reason, because you want business users in as many cases as possible. You want the business users configuring the solution, not an external third party.
Yeah. And Sophie asked, I think, a very similar question. We might have covered it, but I just want to pull it out again. Do you think, Jason, teams need to be technically sophisticated to implement automation technologies?
It helps. There's no question about it, because at least if they have some technical chops in-house, or at least on a short-term basis, they can perhaps hire a consultant who's technical in nature, who can at least do the overall high-level overarching solution architecture for their stack of technologies to make sure they're all going to play nice together, to make sure that there's not going to be any crazy pain of trying to get those systems to share data and talk to each other. At least whether that capability is in-house or they hire it in for either long or short period of time. I think it's very difficult today to establish a robust commerce stack with no technical ability in-house. I think it's just very hard. It certainly can be done, particularly if you're a one-man woman band and you go and set up just a Shopify store, you install 3 apps and you try to go selling, right? Maybe as a side hustle. Then maybe you don't necessarily need to be that technical. But the moment that an online business moves from a side hustle to a main hustle, and it is the primary revenue driver for that person's life, all of a sudden now you go from something that's fun and maybe augments your income to you're dependent on it. Now you need to have some technical chops, because really you can pretty easily architect something that is not scalable. You can pretty easily architect something that is not easy to be integrated into other systems or automated. It's pretty easy to make some architectural mistakes that have long-term consequences. And so when you start to become dependent on your business and it starts to become a significant portion of your life, that's when architecture matters a lot.
Yeah. And before we leave, I want to ask the final question before we close for today, Jason. You have a fit for commerce framework, right? Like, how can folks who are listening in today and who will be watching the live stream later, how can they utilize this framework to actually decide a technology and automation fit for their business?
Yeah, so our Fit for Commerce framework has 4 primary pillars. Those pillars are people, process, tech, and data. And you'll notice very specifically, I didn't have tech at the top of that stack. And the reason why tech is not at the top of that stack is because tech is but one component. It's a very important component, but it is certainly not the only component of a sound, scalable, sustainable digital commerce strategy. It's not, because you have to have the people, you have to have the processes. So you have to have good org design. You have to have good process design. You have to have great tech that shares data and talks to each other and is architected properly. But most importantly, you also have to have great data. And when I go in and I consult with merchants, oftentimes their product data and or their customer data is not ready for digital channels yet. So when I look at their product models, their parent-child relationship with products, or their structured and unstructured product data and attributes, a lot of that data is not ready yet for selling online, whether it be through a marketplace or through their own D2C website or whatever. It's just not ready yet. And so therefore, we have to start, we have to work basically from the customer experience that we're trying to create, and we work backwards from that. And then we also look at any existing processes and or design that are in the business today, and we say, okay, do we need to adapt that or modify that into a digital equivalent, and what does that look like, and what are the challenges we're going to face, and what internal resources do we need to bring to bear on this project? Because you can't outsource everything. You can't outsource strategy. You can outsource tactics and delivery, but you can't outsource strategy. And so it's about, how can we create a strategy that's sustainable for you as a business, that's going to allow you to grow and adopt digital channels in an efficient way that isn't going to break the back of your business? And that's really where, that's really those 4 pillars of the framework.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much, Jason. I mean, I took extra 10 minutes, but I'm sure you're okay about it. And we will have to bring you back, because there's like a ton of more questions that's bubbling in my head, and we have a few more questions coming in, but that's all the time we have today. I hope we can bring Jason back, and thank you, audience, for across the globe. I think a couple of questions came in from North America. So thank you for staying up and watching this live stream, and we'll bring Jason back, we promise. And Jason, what's the best way if someone wants to reach out to you, know more about Fit for Commerce, or just work with you? How do they do that?
I'm kind of everywhere, particularly on social media. LinkedIn is my #1 platform for putting out my content. I put out all my content there first, usually. And then if they want to get directly in touch with me, greenwoodconsulting.net, they can go to my website, but definitely LinkedIn is a great place to get a hold of me and DM me or whatever.
Yep. Folks, please do that. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here, and thank you, audience. We'll catch you again next week.
Thanks, Kals. Have a great day.